Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to talk about why I absolutely hate regions in C# and .NET code, and why you should hate them too and you should not be using them. Now, most people don't use regions, like 99% of people actually hate them already, but there is a pretty vocal 1% that defends them, and I think that this is unfounded defense. So in this video I'm going to explain my case and explain why I hate them and why you should hate them too. So what are regions? I'm sure you've seen them, especially in older .NET code, because back in the day it was like a thing to use, but now nobody really uses them. But let's say this program.cs. You see how this thing is collapsed as services and this is collapsed as endpoints? Well, this collapsibility is based on regions. So if I expand this, you can see I have a region directive, and then I can say region services. You can give it whatever name you want, so register services, for example, and then end region, and you can collapse that, and then you can very easily, as you scan, see that this is a block of code that does a certain type of job. Same thing with endpoints. This is endpoint configuration, for example, and then you collapse it, and happy days, right? Now, I know why at first glance this can look like a good thing. This can look like, oh, your code looks so nice, but your code is not that. That's what your ID presents it as. And remember, C# was built on Visual Studio, so this was originally a Visual Studio thing. Outside of an ID, this does not exist. Your code really looks like this. So not only does it look bad, or at least not properly organized as a code base, for example, this map post should not be here. It should be in a file appropriate for registering scheduling, for example, and this should be here as an endpoint registration for services, for example. So separate methods in separate classes, definitely not here. But the fact that I added a region hides the fact that I have done something wrong, and it doesn't encourage me to go ahead and fix it. And one of the other things you will notice is none of our DOM train authors are using regions because of how much of an outdated and nasty feature it is. And actually, until the end of summer, you can use code SUMMER30 at checkout to get 30% off any of the courses, bundles, or the subscription. Check it out, link in the description. Here's another example. Here, I have a code base called Memory Shop. It was a pretty popular NuGet package back in the day, but you will see this thing quite a lot in old code bases. We're talking 10 plus years ago, where you have a region for fields, a region for properties, and then a region for constructors, and then a region for methods. But disgusting. It's really bad. Why would you look how bloated this looks for code that really just is this? I mean, is this even summary even helping in anything? If you don't think that this summary is helping in anything, then the region isn't really helping either. Same for properties. The properties has a sub thing called children and handles and class names. And what exactly is going on here? If you see this exact code on GitHub when you might review a code base, then as you can see, regions and the collapsibility aspect does not exist. The code still looks like a bloated mess, like the bloated mess it is, because it's not organized properly. And regions will not organize your code properly just because they exist. Some people say, oh yeah, when you review code on GitHub, just check out the code base on your machine and then the regions will work. I'm like, I shouldn't have to depend on an ID for my code to be decently written and clean. So that's my biggest problem with regions. Now, many people have voiced their opinions on regions. Like, it's a thing universally hated, even by Microsoft themselves. You will almost never see them use it. In fact, if you've seen regions in the C# like code base, the .NET code base, it's probably in the HTTP client, because it has this infamous fields region and then a bunch of other stuff like probably methods and all that legacy stuff. I have no idea why they haven't removed this. Like here, yeah. Advanced send overloads, rest send overloads. It's just a bit like, I get it, it's a bunch of overloads and you can make an argument that here it makes sense, but I think a comment here saying rest send overloads is better and more descriptive than a region. In fact, the regions here do act as comments. That's really what they are, but in a different way. And the collapsibility even here does not really exist. Again, many people have talked about why regions are evil. There's many blogs talking about it. For example, I'm surprised how many developers still use regions in the C# code, even in 2016. That is 9 years ago. And even then, it was weird to be using regions. Some years ago, I tend to use regions too. That time students ask me, why do you use regions? My big answer is to clean the code and increase, I don't even know what this word means, its readability. Shouldn't one structure their code so the collapsible code, aka regions, is not needed at all? And that's the main point. Properly split your code. If something doesn't need to be there, don't put it there. Wrapping it in a region will not help. Wrap it in a method, wrap it in something else, and extract it into where it should be. This should go down on its own method or even its own class. Should it? The result was that I never wrote a region again. I have never in my career written a region. When I worked for massive companies, multi-billion corporations, you would never be allowed to write a region. There was not a single region in the code base. It's just a massive code smell showing that the developer tries to hide something in here, and they think that by wrapping it into that idea of a collapsible block, you automatically structured it or made it cleaner. In fact, usually the name of the region itself hints to where that piece of code should be. And it's usually a class or a method with that name. Even on Reddit from 4 years ago, so many people find them useless and annoying. It's just like hiding messy classes under the carpet. And the replies are they're usually used for purpose of writing 100,000 lines in one file, then regions added and making it all pretty. That is why. So ultimately, to hide bad code. That's the theme of this video, because nearly all times I see regions, it's exactly to hide messy code. It's the same thing over and over again. If you use regions, you have messy code. And if you show me code with regions, in fact, if you can point me to a repository of a code base using regions, and you think that usage is good, let me know, and I will show you how you can refactor this code to not use regions and still be equally as clean, if not more clean, because you still won't see a mess like this on something like GitHub when you review. And I shouldn't have to pull down an entire code base to review the code. I can just read it here. Like, what is this? Come on. Even from 14 years ago, I want to remind you, C# is 20 years old. So this was 6 years into the life of C#. People realized regions are bad, and that clearly you should not use regions inside methods or in general, in my opinion, refactor instead. Regions inside methods is the most obvious way to identify something that needs to be extracted into its own method, hands down. If you use something like this, then that should be extracted to something like this. That makes sense. It's straightforward. Even outside methods to group things, like why would you group them? Maybe group them together into a related thing. So is there a good use case for regions? No. They were basically there to hide generated code, which people now hide in partial classes. So there is literally no reason to use them. Even StyleCop has a rule called you should not use regions, never. But I want to know from you, what do you think about regions? And if you use them, why do you use them? Leave a comment down below, let me know. Well, that's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, keep coding.